Good morning. Welcome once again to Sunday School with New Life Church of Orlando. We are located at 3311 North Powers Drive in Orlando, Florida. Bishop Derek W. Hutchins is our pastor. Our lessons are coming from Christian Life series, Union Gospel Press. Today, the subject is the mission of 12 spies. We are coming from Numbers chapter 13, verses 1 through 33. I'm Ruthie Warren. Today's outlines, we have three: the selection of the 12 spies, mission of the 12 spies, and the report of the 12 spies. So let's go ahead and get into our lesson. We're still at Paran, and Moses is the leader, and we're preparing to go over into Canaan, the promised land. Numbers 13, verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Send thou men, that they may search the land of Canaan, which I give unto the children of Israel. Of every tribe of their fathers shall ye send a man, every one a ruler among them. Verse number 3, and Moses, by the commandment of the Lord, sent them from the wilderness of Paran. All those men were heads of the children of Israel. These 12 spies were leaders from their own tribal families. So the people came first. Listen, the people came first and approached Moses to send spies over into the promised land. And God did not tell Moses, no, that was not to be done. It seemed like a good idea. It should help Moses to determine the strategy for conquering the promised land. So Moses agreed. God, of course, already knew who was over there, what was going to happen, but he acquiesced to their request, and so it was. The 12 leaders were sent out to spy out the land. Moses did not go ahead of God and send them out. He did have God's permission. All right? God was in control of this very situation. And Moses did exactly as God had commanded him to do. He chose the men selected from their families. All right, listen. This kind of reminds me of spiritual maturity. Moses is faithful in all my house. How dare you spread grievances against him? That's what we learned in last week's lesson. And so as we listen today, it reminds me of spiritual maturity. We'll touch on that in our conclusion. Let's go ahead and go into outline number 2, mission of the spies. Verse 17, and Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, and said unto them, Get you up this way southward. He's giving them instructions. And go up into the mountain, and see the land, and what it is, and the people that dwelleth therein, whether they be strong or weak, few or many. And what the Lord has given us, the land that the Lord has given us, see whether they dwell in it, whether it be good or bad, and what cities they be that they dwell in, whether they dwell in tents or in strongholds, and what the land is. Moses is giving them directions, whether it be fat or lean, whatever there be, wood therein or not, and be ye of good courage, encouraging their hearts, and bring of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the time of first ripe grapes. It was harvest time. So Moses gave them instructions where to go, what to look for, what to bring back critiques on. What is to be in your report? What do you see? What do your eyes see? This is what Moses was asking them to do. Bring back a good report is what he expected, because he knew what God had already told him. All right? outline number 3, report of the 12. Let's see what kind of report they actually brought back. Verse number 25. And they returned from searching of the land after 40 days. And they went and came to Moses and to Aaron and to all the congregation of the children of Israel unto the wilderness of Paran, to Kadesh, and brought back word unto them and unto all the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him and said, We came unto the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it flowed with milk and honey, and this is the first fruit of it. Nevertheless, the people be strong. The first part of the report was good. Part 2, nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites, and the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. So, these 10 spies are doing roll call. Let's continue. Verse 30. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. Now let me pause here for a minute. The spies remained focused on their fact-finding mission after 40 days, and traveling approximately 500 miles, the mission was completed. Remember, 12 spies. Regarding the land, the 10 said it was a good report. It flowed with milk and honey. This speaks of the bountifulness of the land and the prosperity of the land. But regarding the people, their report was not good. It was inhabited by strong people, large multitudes, and fortified cities. Impregnable is what they said. Hard to be captured, hard to break down the walls, hard to invade. This would be a problem for Israel, and they would not put out a welcome mat for Israel because of their strength and their size. In addition, some of the people were giants. They gave roll call of the inhabitants and concluded that Israel was not going to be able to conquer them. All right, so let's go on to verse 30 and hear what Caleb has to say. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. Caleb. But the men that went up with him said, We be not able to go up against the people, but they are stronger than we. So the remaining 10 still opposed Caleb in his report. Verse 32, And they brought up an evil report of the land, which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, The land through which we have gone to search is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in there are men of a great stature. These are Anak kind of men. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sights as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Now listen, these 10 spies stirred up the congregation, had them excited and ready to run. Caleb was still trying to quiet them, get them to be not excited, but comforted in their God. Israel was excitedly concerned after the negative report of the 12 spies. Caleb, a leader of the tribe of Judah, quieted them, tried to console them, tried to reason with them that the journey was not going to be too great for them with the Lord on their side. Okay, so they had a difference of opinion. Yes, the 10 consistently voiced their opinion. Let's go ahead and conclude this lesson. Interesting point we're talking about today. Spiritual maturity. The fact to warn that we will always find obstacles to overcome us if we fail to obey the Lord. Principle to show that those who lack faith in the Lord are controlled by their situations and their circumstances. We've got to have faith. Application, listen. To mature in our faith to the point that we simply take God at his word and do not put him to the test. We've got to have spiritual maturity, saints. Do we see spiritual maturity in this lesson today? Israel failed to trust God when confronted with difficulty. With all their failures and faithfulness, the Lord's responses prevailed. What about us? Where Israel was impulsive, the Lord was patient. Where Israel was disobedient, the Lord was righteous. Where Israel was doubtful, the Lord was faithful. What about us? What about us? Glamorize the past, exaggerate the present, provides no hope for the future. Moses saw the value in spying out the land. Yes, he did. Faith in God was of the utmost importance. But knowing ahead of time, sizing up the situation, strategizing, and avoiding obstacles of the mission seemed like added wisdom to Moses for reviewing, for spying out the land, and ultimately receiving the promise. Has God made you a promise? Is your promise in sight? The promise might not come easily. You might have to fight. You might have to contend for it. Number one, in your fight, in your contending, have faith in God. You must have faith in God, knowing that God is able and faithful to bring it to pass. Your promise is at the door. The 10 did not see the greatness of their God. They saw only their own weakness before an enemy whose size and power they grossly exaggerated. What about us? And yes, the 10 were weak in faith. After all God had been to them, after all that they had seen God bring them through, their spiritual maturity was lacking. Caleb knew God as Jehovah Nissi, Jehovah the banner, fighting under God's flag, under God's protection. God would defeat the inhabitants according to his very word. His word was out. Caleb's report was with spiritual maturity, knowing and having faith in God for the promise. Yes, Caleb saw the same thing that they saw, but his spiritual maturity led him to render a good report to Moses. Why? Because his spiritual maturity allowed him to have faith in God. The people of God, Israel, were faithless and rebellious, yet the Lord loved them and remained faithful to them. The Lord knew how they would act and continued anyway to bring forth his plan. How amazing is God's grace and mercy. Listen, here's what I want you to do. I want you to rate your maturity. In natural children, they tend to say, I'm grown at 18. All right? By the time they are 21, they declare emphatically, I'm really grown now. But let's allow ourselves 40 years, Israel was wandering in the wilderness. 21 plus 41 plus 40 is what, 61? How far have you progressed at age 61? Are you spiritually mature? Are you naturally mature? Now, I want you to take a look at your spiritual maturity. Where are you in God? How grown up are you? My desire is that you grow up into God in all things, that we be no more children tossed to and fro, but that we exercise not only faith in God, but I admonish you to exercise great faith in God. Great faith in God. When we do not trust God in our situations, as I'm closing, we are controlled by the circumstances. When we don't trust God in our situations, we are controlled by the circumstances. The obstacles and power of the enemy might seem overwhelming. Those who trust the Lord do not ignore the obstacles, but we focus on the power of God to overcome them. Listen, saints, it's time for us to get our act together. Solidify our faith in God. Saints, we must manage our expectations and fight discouragement on every hand in whatever pursuits that are before us. If God be for us, and let me rephrase that, remove the if. Since God be for us, Jehovah Nissi, whom shall I fear? Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Whom shall I fear? God bless you. God bless you, my sisters and my brothers. See you next week for Sunday school as we take another look at the faithfulness of God. We're going to talk about taking God seriously. It's time that we take him at his word. God bless you. See you next week.